Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. All right, today I have software engineer turned author of a book called Brain Refactor, coach and owner of Mindful Dev, Dagna Bieda. We're going to talk about developing an effective mindset to be a software developer. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
Yeah, really excited to speak about not only your book, but about this whole concept of mindset, because I feel like it's one of those packed, loaded words that gets used a lot. And software developers especially probably think, what does that got to do with me? Why do I need to develop this quote unquote mindset? Or my job is just writing code. So I want to dig into that a little bit. But before I do, I'm always curious when I meet people that have written full books. What inspired you to write this book? Can you give me a little rundown of what this book is about to the audience and generally what led you to write it?
Absolutely. So the actual idea to write a book for more junior engineers came to me 7 years ago. And I was with my husband honeymooning, and I was so pumped with this idea of writing a book that I draw these mind maps of what each chapter would be about and what should I put into it? Because at that time I was a senior software engineer and I was mentoring a lot of juniors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I keep saying the same things over and over again. Why not just put it into a book? That would be really useful and easy for me to then, hand off. Oh, here's the book. I don't have to have thousands of conversations again and again. And so the idea came to me 7 years ago, but it took 5 years for me to actually sit down and put all that I had in my mind down into paper.
I bet.
I thought it was going to take me 6 months. I'm not going to lie. The whole writing process from start to finish was I'll be ready. I'm going to have the final product in 6 months or on Amazon. Perfect. And it turned out to be a 2-year process.
Oh, wow.
18 months of actually writing the book and 6 months of getting it ready to production, getting the cover, putting it into readable, nice format, making sure it's, good for Kindle whenever it comes out on October 1st. And so I am super pumped with what went into this book because, with the idea that I had initially, it was because I was a senior engineer coaching junior engineers. Mm-hmm. But adding that extra 5 years is the time frame in which I was coaching. So now I could also put my coaching experience and how I help my clients get past over the obstacles that they were facing in their careers as engineers. So it added this extra depth and dimension to what I was sharing now, because it wasn't only my experience anymore. It was industry-wide kind of a thing. So that's kind of how it came together, and it's a dream come true that I sat down and actually wrote it and I downloaded it. It was a really painful process.
I can imagine.
It's you can compare it to learning programming for the very first time. If you're not super hyped about it, oh my goodness, it's just it's gonna make you cry.
I could imagine, because I like to write, but I've never written. Actually, I have written a very small book, but the going back and forth with editing and thinking how people are going to perceive this, how do you organize your thoughts, right? It's a really monumental task. But I'm glad you did that, because I feel like in this kind of culture, society, we like really fast, bite-sized pieces of information from YouTube videos, and it becomes worthless. And I've found myself going more and more and more towards books as a software engineer to learn things, because I want to take time to read things from people that have taken the time to organize their thoughts and put it together in a way that I can actually digest it. I was talking to another person who's a software engineer, also a coach, and he was saying something interesting. He said, most of the problems my students face aren't technical at all. Almost all of them, especially at the junior level, are what you could call mental. Can you speak a little to the things that you've seen that typically are the roadblocks that people encounter, especially when they're learning to code or earlier in their career?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 4 fundamental obstacles that I've noticed over and over and over that I experienced myself in my career as a software engineer. that I've seen my colleagues experience in their careers or my coaching clients, right? And in the book, in
Mhm.
chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7, every chapter dives into a particular obstacle. The very first one is imposter syndrome, right? That's something that people early on in their career face, but
Yes.
also it often happens to someone who steps into a new role they're not familiar with. Think
Yeah.
of like the first engineer who joined a startup and is now a CTO. Like, what do I do now as a
Hmm.
CTO, right? Or someone who has not managed people and is stepping into that engineering management position, or is doing,
Yeah.
something new out of scope of what they were comfortable doing up until this point in time. So that's when imposter syndrome kicks in. The second obstacle that's super common is burnout. I mean,
Mm,
most of us experience that at certain point in our career because our work is so fun. It's so challenging. It's so intellectually stimulating. You kind
yeah.
of want to stay after midnight to solve that bug, right? And it's
Yeah.
fine if you do it every now and then. But if you do that consistently, if that's your go to behavior, staying past midnight to solving problems, you're heading for trouble. You're on a highway to burning yourself out, basically. The third obstacle that I talk about in the book is essentially trouble dealing with other people. And it
Mm,
makes a lot of sense for engineers. Why?
yes.
Because we put so much effort into honing our technical expertise and we put it at such a high pedestal. We give it so much priority, the technical skills, right? That the soft skills are often either overlooked or we just completely ignore them. And that's something that happened to me, right?
Oh, you've told
I
me a little bit about
actually
this, but I'd love it if you could share because that's interesting to think about because you seem like really personable. You've written a book on this stuff. But yeah, what were some of your earlier days like?
Yes. So as a senior engineer, I moved from Poland to United States. And what happened was I had trouble with adjusting to like the cultural difference of how we communicate differently
Hmm.
between the Eastern Europe and the West and United States specifically. So, I would often come across as too direct, as arrogant, as rude, as mean. And of course, people didn't want to have a mean people leader.
For
So when
sure.
I wanted to get to a team lead position, which was like kind of like my next step, I just kept getting these excuses and I couldn't understand why. And there was a point in time, I gotta admit, there was a
Hmm.
point in time when I thought that this was like a bias against strong professional women because I was really good on my engineering skills.
Okay.
And so it was really hard for me to grasp until I've learned about this tool called Hofstede Insights. And essentially, it shows you that cultural difference on a six different factors dimension kind of a thing.
Okay.
So I use it with my clients right now if they're immigrants or if they're coming from immigrant families and grew up
Hmm.
in the United States, for example, to understand how their cultural upbringing is affecting their communication and is affecting how they are dealing with people or the expectations that they have in terms of collaboration. And we examine if that's something that's holding them back in their career or if it's something that helps them accelerate in their career, right?
Yeah.
My problem was being too direct. Perfectly fine in my culture back home,
Yeah. Okay.
not acceptable in the United States setting.
That's interesting.
And
I
it's
worked
a
with a team of
lesson,
Ukrainians, and that was one of the. I mean, if I'm being honest, it was a bit of an issue. It was just a very direct way of talking, and when I got to know them, they were wonderful people, really nice, super smart. I
right?
mean, and we joke around, but the peer reviews were brutal sometimes, and it was this direct way of talking that I knew was like a cultural difference, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and it's interesting to see that you're on the other side of that here in the States.
Yeah, and at first I didn't see it either.
Mhm.
It took actually years for me to figure it out. And that's something that was holding me back in my career. Like if only someone had told me,
And no one wants to tell you, right? Because it's so awkward to tell somebody, like, "Hey, you're coming
yeah,
across kind of
but also
mean."
my direct management was not like they grew up in the States, they were from here. They didn't see it as a cultural influence. So no one was able to point me
Oh.
in that direction either in the companies that
Interesting.
I worked here in the States, if that makes sense.
That does. Yeah. Wow. And so like, what made you identify this, kind of gain this self-awareness, and then how did you change?
So everything for me came crashing down in 2019 when I experienced postpartum depression after having kids, mixed with burnout at work, mixed with complicated grief, which happened as a result of me moving from United States, leaving my entire life behind
Oh, wow.
and moving here, uprooting my life basically because I fell in love, and people who fall in love do crazy things,
Yeah.
and I moved across the Atlantic. So,
Jeez. It's a
but
lot.
the reality is like I never dealt with what that meant for me
Hmm.
immigrating, right? And that was like another layer of complexity. So when it came crashing down, this one September day that I come into work and I have a one-on-one with my manager, and we're having this conversation, and I start crying, sobbing, like this ugly sob that they're not even showing in
Oh,
TV
no.
dramas,
Oh,
right?
no. At work?
At work,
Oh,
right? And I'm thinking to myself, how am I being so unprofessional? This doesn't make sense. This is not me. I can keep my cool. Like being professional is like really high on my priority list, on my
oh,
personal values.
yeah,
So
right.
I couldn't even grasp how this was happening. And that's when I realized, okay, Dagna, you got to face it. I need help. And I reached out to a therapist. And my therapist, as we worked together through the past and how I became who I was, and how people who raised me added different lines of code into this legacy mental programming that's sitting behind my ears, we had to untangle it. We had to refactor it. And actually, my therapist was the person who told me, look, you lack communication skills,
Wow.
right? There are 4 different types of communication. There's passive aggressive, and assertive.
Hmm.
And in order to work better in the relationships around with the people that are around you in your life, you need to develop the assertive communication skill set, which is something that I was able to learn. And the moment I grasped it, I got that offer to step into that position that I wanted to become a team leader, because
Wow.
how I communicated changed. And as a result, how people saw me changed,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Huge.
And the funniest thing is, the day that I received that offer was the day that I came into the office with a decision to quit, because I was so set into becoming a coach. I
Hmm.
thought, wow, I was talking with this therapist. It was just talk therapy, no meds whatsoever. And talking to this professional who knew what I was going through, who understood my journey, the obstacles, like how it all kind of came together to this crashing moment in that September when I cried in front of my manager. Like, if
Uh-huh.
I could do that, I could have this amazing impact on other people's lives. This is what I want to do. Like, yes, like, okay,
That is
thank you
really
very much
cool.
for hearing.
Yeah.
Time to move into coaching.
That's a really cool story, and thank you for being so candid and sharing that, because I mean, I think we've all kind of been there in some ways. What we don't talk about in software is it's probably one of the most stressful jobs you could have. I don't really have a lot to compare it to, but I know that the stress is real. Like, as much as we talk about the flexibility and the money and all the opportunities, that also comes with the cost of an additional layer of stress, I think, and that can get to people. And burnout is something that I didn't take seriously, honestly, because I thought I'm having fun. I'm doing what you were saying. Like, oh, I'm having fun.
Right?
I'm loving this. I'm staying up late. And eventually my body was like, I don't want to keep doing this. We cannot keep on this grind of doing this. And
Mm-hmm.
as a manager, I had to watch out for the team members also doing that kind of thing. I mean, it's funny. Everything you've spoken about, I relate to. Jumping into new titles and feeling imposter syndrome after like 10 years of writing code and feeling like I know nothing at all. And then getting
Mm-hmm.
the burnout, the emotional toll of writing code or feeling overlooked at work, all these things that you write about in the book and have spoken about. So imposter syndrome is one of those things that is a really hot topic. It's especially poignant, relevant for newer coders. What are some practical steps that they can take or you've seen to like build your confidence in their abilities and maybe not avoid imposter syndrome, but what can they do to like mitigate it?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So for imposter syndrome specifically, there's a difference between having the imposter syndrome, just rule what it is that you're doing, all your actions and your thoughts, versus going through what I call growing pains. And growing pains are completely normal. It's this phase of being uncomfortable because you're growing, and we can often see it with kids, right?
Yeah.
In professional realm, it looks essentially like this: like you're stepping into a new position, right? And the question is, how are you logging the thoughts in your own mind, right? Are those thoughts acknowledging the fact that you're new to the position, so you have to learn? And even though you're failing, you're still going to kind of work it out. Do you believe in yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Or is the imposter syndrome screaming all caps in your own mind? I don't deserve this. Who put me here? I know people will find out that I'm such an imposter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when a lot of people come to me, one of the things that I tell them, that fake it till you make it is like the stupidest advice ever, because that's what primes you for imposter syndrome, right? The question is, how can you understand what it is that you're good at and be able to present it, package it to
Mm-hmm.
the people that are like hiring you, for example, when you're going through an interview process, but do so with an integrity of what you believe to be true about yourself. Because if you lied
Oh
and
yeah.
somehow got that job, you just hurt yourself. Like,
Have you
sure,
ever
you might
seen
be making
somebody?
money
Have you ever seen somebody do that?
to get a job
Yeah.
and feel like you're out of depth. Oh, yes.
Oh no, I mean like straight up lie. I've seen people do that and it comes crashing down and then it destroys them even more because then they really feel like, well, geez, now I've lost all credibility even with myself. But yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So part of dealing with imposter syndrome in my coaching practice is essentially debugging and understanding, where does that imposter syndrome come from? What are some beliefs that you have about yourself that make that imposter syndrome kick in, right? Because growing pains, perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Occasional doubt, perfectly normal. Wondering sometimes if you're cut out for the job, perfectly normal. As long as you can then talk back to those thoughts and be like, okay, I know I'm new. I just have to learn the ropes.
Hmm.
I just need to ask for more feedback, but I'm going to grow. And I have the confidence in myself that I'm going to eventually get it. And that people who put me in the position had that trust in me and my ability to figure things out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I'm really love what you said at the very beginning, right? Whenever the coders say like, oh, I was just hired to write code.
Yeah.
What happened when you get hired in a legacy code base? You have these comments there like, don't touch this because everything will fail and nobody knows why,
No, yeah,
right?
exactly. Right.
And as a coder, you need to figure out how to work within that code base and how to refactor it, how to add new features, how to, debug whatever the users tell you, the end users tell you that is not currently working. We do the same thing in the mind. I like to say that as a coach, I move from programming computers to reprogramming human minds because that's what I do with my clients.
I like
And
that.
essentially, we go in, we do a root cause analysis and try and get the understanding of how that mental legacy code in your brain
Mhm.
came to be, right? Because a lot of the times, like our thoughts aren't even true, but we tend to believe them.
That's a
And
really good
it's
point.
really important to kind of
Mhm.
understand, where are they from? And I mean, you cannot like get blame and see who put it there, right? Like what particular event or what kind of a person put your particular thoughts or behaviors,
Mhm.
but recognizing that it's there and it can be refactored is like the very first step to optimizing whatever it is that you notice as a inefficiency or a bug, right? Like imposter syndrome, for example.
I like a lot that analogy you just gave because I think also this internal dialogue we have going on in our heads, we think it's like the voice of our conscious or something like that, and oftentimes it's just chatter. And it's not
Mhm.
something that's like inherently true. We think, oh, that thing in my head that's saying this must be true. This is a thing going off. And you realize that voice has been curated through over years of your parents, your friends, experiences. So sometimes that voice is not always in your best interest. And that's a powerful idea to think you can control that voice in some ways. You can change how you're speaking to yourself, which I think
Yeah.
is kind of a prerequisite to learning something like how to code, honestly. I'll admit I'm a little guilty of that. I tend to focus so much on the technical portion of like, here, we're going to teach you how to code. And I forget that everybody's starting a little bit differently. And in order to even build habits, you have to have the ability to make habits, to make good habits, to keep yourself motivated and all these things. What are some of the most common mental blocks that you've seen coders, new or otherwise, face?
Oh, I love the one where they tell me like my work speaks for itself. Like, does it really? Other than you and your team members who worked on that exact feature, you worked with them, people have no idea what it is that you do,
It's like,
right?
why did I
Which
get
brings us
hired?
kind
Why
of
did I
like,
get the promotion? I just did that feature that was so complex and no one even noticed.
Exactly. And, back when I was a senior engineer wanting to get promoted to a team lead, like I would, because of my lack of my communication skills, I would often run into those situations where I was like thinking to myself, you should just follow what I said because I'm the SME. I'm the subject matter expert. Like,
Mhm.
why are you not listening to what it is that I'm saying? And I'm right. I'm sure you've seen it too,
Oh,
Ryan.
yeah.
Um, and so it took me a while to kind of really grasp it that you're not a painter. It's not like what you've done is a painting for everybody to see. You have to explain it to them and you have to use a language that's appropriate to your audience. So you're going to speak differently to a fellow coder and you're going to speak differently to a director of marketing,
Yeah.
right? Or a sales representative or a
Mhm.
customer representative. So you have to be able to gain those soft skills that are not part of your education because nobody gives engineers a soft skills playbook, which is kind of sad, really. Like
Yeah,
we tend to
seriously.
really overblow those technical skills. And sure, they get you in the door. They
Mhm.
get you that junior, middle, and senior position. But you're not going to get to a staff engineer. You're not going to become an architect. You're not going to become a CTO if you don't have those people skills. Because at the end of the day, as engineers, as much as we like to hide behind our computers,
Yeah.
we work with other people,
Mhm.
creating products for other people. So the
Yeah.
people aspect is just not inescapable.
It's huge. And I'm at like a really small startup now. I went from big company, I was the engineering manager, and that taught me, not quickly, unfortunately, but I learned through lots of trial and error how important the art of communication is, especially at that level when I was working with the departments, people outside of engineering. And I kept thinking, I'm going to hide back in my code hole and just kind of lead this team, kind of act almost like as a technical lead without really managing.
Mhm.
And I failed in a lot of ways doing that because I didn't take things like presentations seriously. I didn't take things like optics seriously, or how do I identify the pain points of other people in the organization, and all these things that no one ever taught me, right? Like I was like, well, I went from writing code to now I'm managing a team, and now I'm giving a presentation, and now I got to talk to somebody that doesn't know anything about code, and I'm trying to explain to them what we're doing and why it's important, and they have no clue what's
Mhm.
going on. It was trial by fire, and honestly, the principal engineer on the team had me watch some videos on like giving presentations and like how to talk to people. I read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. All these things that you just don't get. You're right. There's no like roadmap for this kind of stuff. And if you've spent a large part of your life trying to get into this profession and you finally get in there and you write code for a lot of years, you're completely unprepared most times for what
Yes.
comes next.
Boom. You said it. You're completely unprepared. But hey,
Yeah.
there's people like you and I who help those who are unprepared. And we've condensed, all this knowledge that we have into coaching or, in my example, the book, for example, too, right?
Yeah, I wish I'd found that book and you at that time, at that pivotal moment that I was in, because I did end up going out, and I fully believe in hiring coaches. I mean, I have coaches at different stages of my life, whether it was for like fitness or business, or when I became an engineering manager, because I felt completely lost. And it's odd because there's like a lack of stuff out there for this. There's not really a manual. There's all the books you need and all the videos on like, here's how you write React code, or here's how you learn Java or whatever, and there's nothing on how do you be an effective leader at all. And when we get back to this idea of communication, and I can't really stress how important enough that is, as you've alluded to, but self-marketing is also important for developers. And that's really difficult for people that are new or not so new to the industry. How do you help people kind of reprogram their brains to become better at the skills of self-marketing and
So
communication?
I'm really glad you kind of brought it up because that was the fourth obstacle.
Oh, okay.
The self-marketing struggles that engineers often face because one, we don't have the people skills, right? During the course of our education, oftentimes we just don't get them.
Hmm.
And then the second part is like those limiting beliefs, like my work will speak for itself, or that, it's that you have to be humble and you cannot brag too much because if you brag, then it's gonna come across as arrogant.
For
And then
sure.
when people don't want to be seen arrogant, they have trouble talking well. But another example that I explore in the book is this simple fact of like accepting a compliment, right? A lot of people will immediately shoot it down
Mm,
with, yeah, I fixed that bug last week, but the feature, I'm kind of slow. Like I thought I'd be done already, right? And
yeah.
instead of accepting the compliment and
Hmm.
taking it for what it is, just information and saying,
Right.
okay, thanks, and moving on. A lot of people, because of how they see themselves, because of how their legacy mental code is structured, they have trouble accepting those compliments. And when that happens, they also have trouble speaking well of themselves in whether that's like company setting
Yeah.
and pitching an idea, basically,
Hmm.
or whenever that happens in an interview setting when you're trying to get a job. And I've been in so many
Oh,
interviews
yeah.
interviewing younger people,
Yep.
more junior people for the job or my peers as
Hmm.
a senior engineer. And sometimes it felt like I had to like pull their tongue to get that information out, right? Because they had
I feel you.
trouble expressing themselves and what they have accomplished in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to deal with this a lot. I had a budget. They're like, well, who do you want to hire? Like one senior or like three juniors or something like that. I'm like, well, I'm taking the three juniors for this kind of work. So I was interviewing the
Right.
junior developers and all these boot camp grads, and they would universally come in and just kind of downplay everything they'd done. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you making it harder for me to say yes to you? Come here. Oh, well, I made this little app at this boot camp, and I'm like, that's not that's not the way you want to come across here. But you're right. We like to downplay ourselves, especially if you're new, and probably other people that just tend to feel nervous or shy or something like that. We downplay our own accomplishments. And I've heard of people doing things like keeping a brag document, which I started doing at the last company I was at. That was really helpful, not only for me mentally, because I'd look back at it and see, oh, okay, I actually did do some things this year. Because
Uh-huh.
3 months ago, I don't remember what I did 3 months ago, but keeping them there was helpful, not only for promotions and for my
Uh-huh.
mental health, but also just to kind of catalog these things so I could create like a good story for myself when I went to the next company and I wanted to go to an interview and tell them what I had just done, at this place here.
Part of marketing yourself is also understanding what kind of impact you can make,
Hmm.
right? Which engineers usually miss because they don't really, many times, they don't care about the business side of things, right? But like, let me tell you about this funny situation that happened to me as an engineer. I was working on these two tasks literally back to back. I did one on our mobile app, which essentially changed the build process and it reduced the build time from like 5 something minutes to like 20 or seconds.
Oh, wow. Geez.
And I was like so proud of
Yeah,
myself. I
seriously.
was like loading, right?
Yeah,
Felt like a huge
it's
achievement.
huge.
And guess what, Brian?
What?
Nobody cared.
That's
Like
wild. I'm
Nobody
excited
cared,
hearing that. I'm like, oh wow,
right?
that's
Nobody cared. But literally the next week, I was put on a task that was for a high profile client. It was extremely boring. It was like a
Mhm.
copy paste kind of thing,
Yep.
configuring one of the apps that we had for that client so they could beta test something. And turns out because that client brought tons of revenue in the company, the
Mhm.
moment I gave the end users, their beta testers, the app and, deployed it and they were able to use it, everybody from the customer rep, the sales rep, my manager, their manager, everybody's like, Dagna, great job. Yes, that's amazing. And I was like,
For
what just
real?
happened? Right?
Like this?
Like, how is it that something that I found challenging, stimulating, difficult, hard was just dismissed?
I
And
know.
something that I found boring and just, ugh, and I didn't want to do it. So I did it really fast to get it out of my plate. And that actually ended up getting me all this praise. And that's when something clicked. I had, and I see it a lot of the time with the engineers that I work with and other ambitious professionals in tech that I work with, this what I called hard work,
Ah, I think I know
where
where you're going with
essentially
this. Yeah.
we value things
Mhm.
that are difficult, that are hard, that are intellectually stimulating, and we kind of chase them as
Yeah,
engineers.
for
That
sure.
makes us go late into the night, burning the midnight oil,
Mhm.
burning ourselves out, right? But sometimes it's the boring that has impact. So instead of chasing what's fun and intellectually stimulating, sometimes what's better for your career as an engineer in tech
Yeah.
is to do the boring thing, right? And understand the impact. So another thing that I work with my clients on is having what I call business acumen, having
Mm.
that understanding of how you as an engineer fit into the business and how what you do on a daily basis trickles down to revenue, retaining clients, getting new clients. And by doing that kind of work, that also helps you with self marketing because
Oh,
now
yeah.
you understand what's the value that you bring so you can actually talk about it.
Oh, 100%. The business thing, all these things, I'm like, wow, these are things I wish I had just known or taken seriously before. Because you're absolutely right. I didn't think of these things. I'm like, well, why would I need to know this kind of thing about the business? I'm just, a little person here. Now I'm in a really small startup and I see how important it is when you're really close to the
Yeah.
product to understand this. But even at a major company, that was an important thing. Once I started knowing and caring about that, then I could identify what features I thought might actually move the needle for revenue or, longer sessions on the site. But that story you said, that was so funny because I'm thinking of like times when I changed the color of a button, or and the sales team is so happy about that. The marketing team, like, oh, finally we got that thing we've been wanting on the team. I'm thinking, I didn't realize what people cared about.
When I talk about improving the brain, right? Um, and, I graduated as a robotics engineer and then migrated into software engineering after I realized that building robots takes too long and it's not as impactful as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Sounds
Um,
cool.
but when I talk about refactoring the brain, what
Mhm.
I do in my coaching and what my therapist did for me was kind of like a software update, right? And the software updates, I don't know if you ever experienced it on a test phone or like your own device, but if
Mhm.
you have an older phone, you're not always able to use all the new features that come out.
That's right.
So if you have the newest software, but your hardware is updated or outdated or is not functioning properly, then that software cannot shine, right? You cannot use it,
Yeah.
right? And so for anyone out here listening, I highly recommend considering not only doing the software updates, whether that's with therapy or coaching, but also doing a hardware update of your brain. And here's what I specifically mean. Back in, actually, it was last year when I dove into the topic, I discovered 2 years ago something called neurofeedback training.
I'm
But
curious.
essentially,
Yeah.
it's this concept of improving your brain literally on the hardware level, right? I'm so excited about this because I discovered it when I was pregnant with one of my kids. And I knew I had a, past experience of postpartum depression. And I thought it was going to happen again. And I thought, oh man, it sucks. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just binging this show on Netflix about psychedelics. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. But like, I can't really risk it. I can't just like go tripping.
Yeah, right.
Because I have a family, I have young kids, I have responsibilities. Like, what if I don't come back?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I realized that if I could scan my brain and somehow prepare it for a trip, then that could be incredibly beneficial. Because in one of those documentaries, I heard this scientist in the lab kind of summarizing what his patients were telling him as he was literally scanning their brains in a machine in a lab setting as they were tripping. And some people told him that it's like 10 years of therapy in a weekend because there's nowhere to hide. You are the patient, you're the therapist, and it's all happening in your brain. There's nowhere to hide.
Wow. Sounds nuts. This
right?
sounds intense.
But I've seen a major improvement in a couple of months of therapy that I did. And then I thought, wow, I can have this like super extra accumulated outcome in just one weekend.
Yeah,
I
how does
want
it
it,
end up? Yeah, what happens? I have to know.
So essentially, after watching the documentary and realizing the risks because of my young family, I figured out if I only could scan my brain somehow and see whether or not my brain is like predisposed to having a bad trip, not coming back, or experiencing any of, the terrible outcomes that can sometimes happen.
Yeah.
I found out that part of the neurofeedback training is first making a brain map. Essentially, they put this little cap on your head and measure the brain wave frequencies in different parts of your brain.
Okay.
And then they analyze it. So you can see literally how the hardware of your brain works. And there's research that suggests if your DMN, the default mode network in your brain is healthy and in the right frequencies, you're very much unlikely to experience negative effects of a psychedelic trip.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I'm doing this neurofeedback thing because it helps with postpartum depression. Perfect. I don't want to experience it again. Like, yes, let's go.
Yeah.
And the neurofeedback training is phenomenal because from the perspective of a client or a patient, all you have to do is show up to your appointments and then you watch TV. And then what happens is as you're watching TV, there's special software that either changes the size of what it is that you're watching or dims the brightness or dims the volume of what it is that you're listening to. And as a result, your brain has to put more effort into adjusting to those changes. Your brain doesn't like that. It's a micro penalty. So what happens is if your brain can stay on the desired frequency, then nothing changes, right? And your brain wants that because it doesn't want to waste energy. So you're basically retraining your brain to work in those optimal frequencies because, at the beginning you have that map. The map tells you these 20 areas of your brain out of 50 are working suboptimally. Some are too slow, some are too fast. Those you gotta slow down, those you gotta speed up. So they work like a symphony, like an orchestra.
Yeah.
And so you know what it is that you need to fix. You know what frequencies you want to reward. And it's super easy. All you have to do is pay and show up, right? Just like updating your phone. You basically show up to the store, show up your credit card, and you get a new hardware. And now all your software updates can work too. Because you not only have the newest software, but you also have the newest hardware. Right?
Interesting.
And I mean, this is so exciting that I just love talking about it. So I really appreciate that I had the opportunity to share that with your listeners, Brian.
Wait, so where does one go to do this kind of thing? This sounds very like experimental and I've never heard of this. I'm curious, if I wanted to do this, where do I go?
So what you want to do is on Google Map or whatever map you're using is try and find a local biofeedback clinic the does QEEG biofeedback
Okay.
or neurofeedback. Depending on where you're located in the world or United States even, it might have a different name. It's so young that it's not fully, like it doesn't have like common patterns, I guess. But from what I've seen, because I've been helping my clients find those clinics all over the world, it's usually either neurofeedback training or QEEG biofeedback. Also, we can link to my Substack article where I share even more details about my own experience.
Please send me that. It'll be in the show notes by the time this is published, because I, for one, want to read this because I'm very interested in this idea. Because a lot of times I think we all think that we're unique, and maybe we all are. But I often wonder, is the way I think normal, abnormal, optimal, suboptimal? It's a really cool idea that you can do that. And it seems less novel than it would have sounded maybe 10 years ago, because like things like Neuralink are a thing now, where we are already intercepting or interacting with brain waves and patterns in order to help people do all sorts of cool things. So this, a few years ago, I would have maybe heard this and thought, that doesn't sound like reality. Now I'm like, this sounds like something I want to look into. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I can't wait to put that in the show notes too and share it with other people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then, on top of that, psychedelics are kind of getting a little bit of a hype too. And so like,
especially in
if
tech.
you want to know if you're at risk or danger, I mean, obviously part of it is your medical history or your family's closest blood relatives, their medical history.
Yeah.
But knowing specifically that your specific brain's DMN is healthy and you're not likely, of course, there's no guarantees.
For sure.
But it's all about managing risk, right? Yeah. And so I did end up going to a psychedelic retreat. Like, it's really important to find a setting that's legal, that's safe, and has like medical supervision on site. And I can tell you that I was tripping with about probably 40 other psychonauts. And it was literally a lifetime of wisdom delivered in a weekend. So the person that said in that documentary that was 10 years of therapy, like, it was even better, in my opinion. But I feel like it was my cherry on the top because I've done all those things before to prepare myself.
Wow.
The therapy, the coaching, the neurofeedback training. And that's why I feel like the psychedelics was the cherry on the top. And I'll probably never do it again. I don't feel like I ever have to.
This took a turn I did not expect. I did not picture.
I do mention it in the book, so make sure you check it out because it's basically in the chapter on burnout. So hint, hint.
That is a hell of a story. That is so cool. That is like such a, it's always interesting speaking with people and learning these like really interesting parts of their lives and just getting exposed to things I never would have thought about. That is cool. Wow, okay. Now I definitely have to read more of this book. And that was a heck of a twisty tale. We went from coding, communication into psychedelics and brain patterns. Love it. Where can people find you online? Where can they find your book?
Honestly, LinkedIn's the best place. Okay. And if you're listening to before October 1st, I am looking for beta readers that will help me improve the book even further. So if you just DM me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we'll link that in the show notes as well, then I would love if you reach out and I can tell you more about what does it mean to be a beta reader. Basically, I'm asking for feedback and reviews that could help my book become a bestseller when it officially launches on October 1st. So that's the best place. The second best place is on my website, themindfuldev.com. And there's a special tab with the book inside, so you can find it easily on Amazon as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, and I can't wait to check out the book as well as the Substack article and share it with everybody else as well. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out Parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our Dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.